Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Shruti Smriti Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavatpadam Shankaram Lokashankaram Shankaram Shankaracharyam Keshavam Badarayanam Sutrabhashya Krutau Vande Bhagavantau Punah Punah Ishvaro Gururatmeri Murti Bheda Vibhagine Vyomavad Vyapta Dehaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha. Chaitanyam Sarvagam Sarvam Sarvabhuta Guhashayam Yat Sarva Vishayatitam Tasmai Sarvavide Namaha. We are starting the 16th chapter called the Parthiva Prakaranam. Again, because the first verse of the chapter is Parthivaha, so it is titled Parthiva Prakaranam. Introducing the chapter, the Tikakara says, Purvasmin Prakarane Ekadeshi Mata Pratikshepa Mukhena Brahmaikatva Jnanameva Swarupa Avasthana Lakshana Moksha Sadhanam Na Bhedavida Jnanamiti Pratipaditam. Looking at the very first verse of the earlier chapter, Nanyat Anyat Bhaved Yasmat Nanyat Kinchit Vichintet Anyasya Anyata Bhavehi Nashas Tasya Dhruva Bhaved. Nanyat Anyat Bhaved, the basic rule is that one thing cannot become another. There cannot be transformation in nature of something. Anyasya Anyata Bhavehi. If one thing becomes the other, if the worm becomes the wasp, then worm cannot be, and a wasp alone can be. Nashas tasya dhruva bhavet. Then there is a nasha, destruction of the worm if it becomes a wasp. The question is, what is the benefit? Who has become what? This is accepting that Jiva is different from Brahma. And that Jiva becomes Brahma, this is the Paksha here. And so this is the Bhedavada. There is a Bheda also, there is the state of cause, there is oneness, and cause and effect, state of effect, there is anotherness. So these vadas were first refuted here. And that is why the Tikakara here says, Purvasmin Prakarane, Ekadeshi Mata. So ultimately they do accept the oneness of Jiva and Brahma, but once the qualified acceptance of that position is there, the Jiva becomes Brahma, then there is one. Or in the state of effect, like the waves, there are many. State of cause, like water, there is one. So this way, Bheda Paksha, Bheda Paksha. They do not make sense because Bheda and Abheda cannot coexist. So Bheda, if there is real division, then Abheda cannot. In case it is, then one of the members doesn't remain. Then who is the one that becomes Brahma? So this is perhaps to take into account our experience of sense of individuality. That how Jiva, the individual, becomes Brahma. Otherwise, how can there be, when Upanishad says that you are Brahma, how can you explain that? Because I am Jiva. So Jiva becomes Brahma. All Jiva and Brahma enjoys oneness when all the duality merges into the cause. And as long as the duality of name and form is there, so long they are different. This is based on giving reality to what we think, the Bheda, the divisions that we experience, giving them reality and then interpreting and fitting the Upadesha of the Upanishad, Sarvam Khalvidam Brahma, all this is indeed Brahma. Oh, you are Brahma, these statements are not taken literally. But in a qualified, you will become Brahma if you do such and such thing. And so Vedanta is not necessary because there is no Bheda to talk about. What you are experiencing is not that Bheda or division, that is what you are projecting. What you are experiencing is one non-dual truth, but that is self-effulgent. That's yourself. That's self of all, and that's all there is. This is the grand vision that the Upanishad unfolds or expounds. And even logically also, this alone makes sense. So all logical reasons also are given. That Brahmekatva Jnanameva, therefore the knowledge of the Brahmekatva, or Brahma, say Atma and Brahma are one. Even though you begin with two, Brahma is Jagat Karanam, Atma is the cause, nature of individual, you begin that way. Then realize that what is the essential nature of myself is the essential nature of universe, is the essential nature even of Creator. So Brahmekatva Jnanameva, the knowledge of oneself, oneness, identity, of Brahmana, or whatever it is. So Tatpada, Tvampada, together they are meant to include everything. Tvampada, everything else is Tatpada. Ekatva Jnanam, that Tvam and Tat are not different. At some point there is a difference, there's some level of Upadhi. Ishajivayo Veshadibhida Satsvabhavatu Vastu Kevalam. So from the stand of Sat, which is Svabhava, there is only one Vastu. Swarup Avasthana Lakshana Moksha Sadhanam. Why is there some kind of a, opposition to this is very difficult for us to accept. Why should somebody want to justify and prove the duality? Ultimately, what do you get out of that? That means that you remain limited. In remaining limited, you can never be comfortable with your own self. One cannot be comfortable with the limited self, one's own self. So there cannot be moksha. Total freedom and comfort cannot be. There cannot be comfort as long as something is different from me, then I don't feel comfortable. With myself, with the other one also. Therefore, Swarupa, Avasthana Lakshana, Moksha Sadhanam. Avasthana, abiding in the essential nature of oneself, is the means of moksha. Na bheda bheda jnanam, na bheda jnanam, na bheda bheda jnanam. Iti pratipadidam. So this was what was expounded in the earlier chapter, particularly in the beginning. aduna sarva tarkika mata pratishedena. Again, by tarkika are meant those who arrive at the nature of reality based on their observation and then like scientists. So you begin with the duality which you observe and then arrive at what must be the essential nature of what I am experiencing. All that deductive logic, so you start with an experience and arrive at the nature of, what the experience means. And they begin saying that there is duality and therefore Tarkikas begin with giving reality to what we experience. Give reality to one's sense of limitedness, reality to the dual difference that I am the subject, everything is object. So beginning with assumption that this duality, division is real, and then you explain what it is. Sarva Tarkika, and everybody is called Tarkika. That includes not only Tarkika, Vaisheshika, Sankhya, everybody is included as Tarkika, ultimately because whether they begin the observation of the world and then by Tarka arrive at the conclusion or that theory, or they take a statement of the Vedas also and then arrive with Tarka and an interpretation of what it means. But for all of them, ultimately, Tarka is the means of arriving at the understanding of what the reality is. We take some stray statement from the Upanishad and say, this is my basis. But then not reconciling that statement, every other statement. The way to understand one sentence is when you can reconcile that with all other sentences. Puja Swami used to say that to understand the whole Gita, you must understand every verse. To understand every verse, you must understand all the verses. You can't take just a verse and then, elaborate on that and arrive at this is what Bhagavad Gita says. So these fellows already have a conclusion and they find a suitable statement from the Upanishads or somewhere and then justify. But all of them, nobody can arrive at non-duality by tarka. By reasoning, you cannot arrive at the non-duality because you started with duality. Having given reality duality, no reasoning can bring you to non-duality. Sarvatarika mata pratishedena. That's the reason why Vedanta says Upanishad Pramanam. Vedanta Nama, Upanishad Pramanam. Upanishad is Pramanam. What is Upanishad? Sarvam Khalvidam Brahma. That's Upanishad. You are Brahma. That's Upanishad. And then explain duality. Not start with duality and then explain the non-duality. Start with non-duality and then explain that duality has to be mithya. If Upanishad is Pramanam, in saying that what is Brahma, then you explain duality, how it is not Brahma. So our approach is not Tarkika. Our approach begins with Pramanam and then explains your experiences. That is how we arrive at this understanding that what you are experiencing, the duality, the division cannot be real if the Upanishad is right. And this has to be only appearance, so mithya. That's how the concept of mithya came. Brahma Satyam Jagat Mithya. Brahma cannot be Satyam, Jagat also is Satyam. And so, the whole approach that Vedanta has is of a different nature. Understand? It's not a scientific approach. It's not deductive logic that you are from experience, you begin arrive at the truth. You begin with the truth and explain the experience. That's what Vedanta does. sarvatarkika mata pratishedena. Our mind also is tarkika, mind also takes for granted the duality. And therefore, that mata pratishedena, whatever conclusions we have drawn about our life, based on what we think is what we are experiencing, all of that pratisheda. In the mind also, all the conclusions based on giving reality to duality or to my sense of individuality, they have to go pratishedena, mumuksham, swarajya abhishek. That's how I can let go of my complexes. I am suffering a variety of complexes starting aham mama, which are all based on giving reality to this body-mind complex that it is Atma. And therefore, mumukshum swarajya abhishektum. This mumukshu is a sincere person. His desire for moksha. Therefore, swarajya abhishektum, to anoint him in his own kingdom, in the sovereignty that his true nature is. Prakranantaram arvamanaha. Teacher who is now commencing the next chapter. Prasamam Sulashiratmavadimatam Nirakaroti. So Tarkikas arrive at the explanation of experience that this is what, this is Atma. That's the immediate thing. The Atma is consciousness, body is conscious, body is Atma. Begins with the Parthiva iti. So the first verse says, Parthiva kathino dhatuhu Dravo dehe smruto maya Pakti cheshta avakasha syuhu Vannivaivam varodbhavaha. This body is made up of the 5 elements: earth, water, fire, air and space. That's what the body is. And therefore it cannot be Atma. So this is the first observation. There the conclusion comes from accepting body as a conscious entity. Therefore, this Deha is Atma because it is conscious. Vedanta says that how can it be conscious? It is composed of 5 elements, each one of them is unconscious. So how do you arrive at the assembly as a conscious entity? So somehow they explain how the betel leaf and then the lime, you combine them, you red color and stuff like that. So some examples are given. But unconscious things cannot change their nature and become conscious. So therefore, this Deha is Parthiva or is Bhautika. It's nothing but the products of the combination or assemblage of the bhutas or elements. It's an elemental thing. Parthiva kathino dhatuhu dehe. Yes, sthula dehe kathino dhatuhu mamsadiruva sa parthiva prithvyamshah पृथ्वी परिणात्मकः स्मृतः ज्ञातः विद्वद्भिः इत्यर्थः. पार्थिव कठिनो धातु देहे स्मृतः स्मृतः ज्ञातः विद्वद्भिः. So the vidwan, meaning the people who are knowledgeable in this aspect, they know that dehe kathul dehe kathino dhatu. All the 7 dhatus are there. Of them, the kathina dhatu, which is tangible or solid dhatu, which is mamsadi rupa. So dhatus are 7, of them mamsa, etc. This is made of the earth. So tvak, charma, rudiram, asti, mamsa, majja and shukra. So all these dhatus are there. If you include shukra, it becomes 8, otherwise 7 dhatus. Of them, the mamsadi rupa asthi, mamsa, so majja, this is all solid stuff. The parthiva, prithvi amshaha, prithvi parinamatmaka, smutaha. That the wise people tell us, or the learned people tell us that this is all the transformation of Prithvi, the element Prithvi of the earth. Drava ammayaha, even dravaha. So whatever is fluid in the body is ammayaha, is modification of up or water, like rudira, etc. So drava ammayaha, parinamaha. So rudira, etc., that dhatu is parinama, is transformation of water. Bhakti, pakaha, the warmth in the body is the result of the fire. Chesta, spandanam, all of movements are there, all is prana. Avakasha, the space which is there, the apertures which are there in the body. Annapanamana, what is avakasha? Annapanamana sanchara marga, dehagata sushaya syuhu. In the body also there are many apertures which allow the passage of the food, of the water, of the blood, or even of the mind also. So manasam sancharama, annapana manasam sanchara marga. Sanchara marga, the passages for movement of food, of water, of the fluid, of the mind also. So you need apertures for them to flow, and they are space, element space. Ete kamana vanni, vayu, ambarodbhavaha. So all the warmth is the nature of the fire. All the chesta, movement is the nature of the vayu or the prana. And all the apertures are all the effect of the avakasha or element space. Dehanugata vanyadi amsikarya bhutaha. In short, all of the amsa element, the fractions of these five elements. Meaning that deha is made up of these five elements, such as deha, anatma, bhuta parinamatvat, valmikadivati bhavaha. So from this the conclusion is deha. If atma is chetana, then deha is achetana because bhuta parinamatvat. It is the parinama or the modification of bhuta of the five elements is bhautika. Like valmika, like an anthill is also bhautika. Now you can see that thing. The body is not different from that in essence, in reality. Therefore, this body is unconscious, therefore it cannot be atma. Indriyatmadinam pratyaha. Now this is the argument against those who say that indriyadar atma. So next verse is घ्राणादीनि तदर्थाश्च पृथिव्यादिगुणाः क्रमात् रूपालोकवदिष्टं हि सजातीयार्थमिन्द्रियम्. Granadini, starting with the grossest element, organ of perception, namely the organ of smell. Tadarthascha, Granad Indriyani, Tadarthascha. All organs of perception begin with Grana or organ of smell, Tadarthascha, and the corresponding object. Gandha, Rasa, Rupa, Sparsha, Shabdaha. Gandha is the object of Granendriya, Rasa of Rasanendriya, Rupa is Chakshurendriya, Sparsha is the Sparshendriya, Shabda is the Shrotrendriya. So Indriyani tad arthaha also, the sense organs of perception and that corresponding objects which they reveal. Vishaya, Artha means Vishaya, Gandhadaya, Kramat, Prasivyadinam, Gunaha Karyani. They are also respectively the sense organs. Understand? Now we are talking about sense organs. The sense objects are known to be Bhautika. Shabda, Sparsha, Rupa, Rasa, Gandha. Now from this the teacher wants to establish that the organ of perception, the corresponding organ of perception that perceives that corresponding object is also Bhautika. That even the Ghrana, the Indri, Ghanendriya also is Prasivkaryam or Prasivkarya. The sense organ of perception of smell is also the modification or product of the element earth. Because the Vishaya, the Grana that this sense organ perceives is Parthivam of the earth, and therefore the one that perceives also belongs to the same class of what is perceived, and therefore the sense organ, namely Ghanendriya, also is also elemental Bhautika. So so this is a very interesting argument. To establish that sense organs are also Bhautika or products of Bhuta or Mahabhuta, a very interesting argument is that the Grahaka and Grahya, both of them should belong to the same class. One that perceives and what is perceived should belong to the same class, then only perception can take place. So the Tikakara will explain, Gandha, Rasa, Rupa, Sparsha, Shabdaha, Tavat. So it is well known, Prasiddha, it's well known that the Gandha, Rasa, Rupa, Sparsha, Shabda, all these sense objects, Prithvi, Up, Tejo, Vayu, Akashanam, Kramena Dharmaha, Prasiddhaha. Gandha is the Prithvi Dharma, Rasa is the Up Dharma, Rupa is the Tejas Dharma, Sparsha is the Vayu Dharma, and Shabda is the Akasha Dharma, Prasiddha. So this is already well known. Tesham Granadi Eka Eka Indriya Grahyata Anvaya Vyatirekasta Siddha. Another important thing is that Tesham Granadi, these five elements, the earth, the water, the fire, the air, space, are respectively grasped by or perceived by the respective sense organs of the Ghanendriya, Rasanendriya, etc. Anvaya Vyatirekasta Siddha. Anvaya Vyatirekasta means which Indriya perceives which object. Why not eyes can taste things? Why not the skin, which is the Sparshendriya, be able to see things? Anvaya Vyatireka. So Granam Rupadishu Gandhasya Vyanjakatvat. The Ghanendriya is merely Vyanjaka, or the one that brings to manifestation only the Gandha. There are Shabda, Sparsha, Rupa, Rasa, Gandha, five aviks are there. Of which, what does Ghanendriya do? Of the five elements, the Ghanendriya is Vyanjaka. It brings to manifestation only smell and not taste and touch. So, by Anvaya, that Ghanendriya is there, smell is there. Vyatireka, Ghanendriya is there, this Sparsha is not there. So this is our Anvaya Vyatireka we determine which particular organ of perception perceives which object. We have taken for granted. This is how our mind must have worked, to arrive at this conclusion. Tesham Granadi Eka Indriya. Each organ of perception, Grashyata, perceives only the respective element, earth, water, etc. Anvaya Vyatireka. We also know that we cannot see with skin, etc. Tathacha Yad Indriyam Yasya Dharmam Grahayati Tad Indriyam tasya sajati bhavitum arhati. So indriya grahayati. Indriya or the sense organs make us perceive. Ultimately, it is the ego, the self that perceives everything, and organ of perception becomes the means of that. So therefore this Ghanendriya. So Gandham Grahayati. The Ghanendriya enables me to perceive the smell. Tatha Yad Indriyam Yasya Dharam Grahayati. A given organ of perception enables me to perceive dharma, the attribute of which element. That sense organ should be made up of the same element. Ghanendriya makes me perceive the smell. Smell is a dharma of the element earth. So Ghanendriya also is nothing but modification of earth, because they must belong to the same class. Because we discovered that a given organ of perception can only perceive a given object. Ghanendriya can perceive only the Gandha, which is earth, and not any other object. That can be only when the Ghanendriya belongs to the same class as the element earth. Tadindriyam tasya sajatyam bhavitum arhati. So sajatiyata belong to the same jati, same class. Ghanendriya and the object that it perceives, Gandha, must belong to the same class, namely earth. How do you say? Yatha taijasasya rupasya prakashako dipadi taijaso drushtaha. Drishtanta is an external phenomenon. Rupa, we know that the color is a product of the element tejas or element fire. And what is it that illumines the rupa or the color? It is a lamp that illumines that color. So taijasasya rupasya prakashakaha. The rupa, that is color or form, which is well known as the product of the element fire. So prakashaka, the one that illumines that, the lamp also is nothing but element of fire, element fire. Dipadi taiso drushta. So this is what we find, drushta. We find that it is lamp illumines colors. Lamp does not illumine smell, or taste, or touch, or sound. Illumines color. So lamp is tejasa, it is light. Color also is product of tejas or element fire. And so we find the sajatiyatvam of the illuminator and illumined. Sajat, similarly also, the indriya, the illuminators, the objects are illumined, therefore they should belong to the same class. Tatha indriyani api bhautikānām prakāshakatvat. So sense organs also prakāshakatvat, being the illuminator of bhautika or the elements, elementals. Bhautikāni eva iti, therefore the organs of perception also are bhautikāni. They are also products of the five elements because they only illumine the respective elements. Iti anumanamah. So second line was Rupa aloka vadishtami sajatiyartham indriyam. Rupa alokavat. So Rupa means the color. Aloka means the light or the flame, lamp. Just as they are sajatiya, so also Indriyas must enjoy have the same class as the objects that they illumine. So Indriyas are also bhautika. Evam Indriyanam bhautikatva siddhe dehavat ishamapi anatmatva vibhavaha. So just as a body is understood as an atma because it's bhautika, the sense organs also are bhautika, therefore they are also an atma. For indriyani, another reason also is given. Kincha indriyani na atmanaha. Furthermore, the sense organs are not atma, not conscious entities. Karanatvat, because they are karana or they are the instruments. Kothara devata chidikriya. When a woodcutter performs the act of cutting the wood, he requires karana, he requires the means, namely kuthara. He requires an axe to cut them. So also the sense organs of perception and all organs, in fact, they are serving a purpose similar to kuthara or an axe in every action that takes place. So action of perception that takes place, like seeing a color. What is the role of eyes? Eyes are the karanam. The color is the karma. And the manasa, buddhi, etc. the karta or the drashta. So in the drashta darshanam, the sense organ of perception is the karanam. Is pramanam also karanam. So karanatva, because the organs of perception, organs of action are karana, they are the instruments. Kutharavat, like a kuthara, like an axe. Therefore, na atmanaha, therefore they cannot be atma. Anumanantaram. First anumana is that the organs of perception belong to the same class as the objects that they live in. And secondly, in the elimination process, the organs of perception are karana, therefore they are not karta. Atma is a karta, is a perceiver. And organs of perception are not perceivers, therefore they are not atma. Anumanantaram suchayan, the anumana is now suggested here. Karyavasat indriyanam ekadasva niyamaha. And because of the karya that is done, there are 11 sense organs, that's what the text says here. Buddhyarthani. So, the third verse says, Buddhyarthanyahuretani Vakpanyadini karmane Tadvikalparthamantastham Mana ekadasham bhavet. Etani buddhyarthani ahuhu. Etani, the organs of perception which were mentioned in the first verse, they are referred to by etani. Buddhyarthani, they are meant for knowledge, meaning that they are the organs of knowledge, the organs of perception. Vakpanyadini karmane, where is the organ of the speech, hands, legs, they are all for karma, so they are karmendriyani. Tad vikalpartham andastam mana ekadasam bhavet. Here the argument is very simple, a very different argument. So what is the role of mind? The mind is responsible for the perception of object one at a time. We perceive objects one at a time, one thing at a time. What enables us to do that? There is a faculty in the mind which enables us to do that. So you would accept the faculty called the mind. That anyatra manhavam na dushtam, this is how the established mind was established to be there. Here the different kind of reasoning is given. Tad vikalpatham, it is for the vikalpa, antastham manaha, that the mind which is inside, antahkaranam, ekadasam bhavet, is called the 11th karanam. 5 organs of perception, 5 organs of action, and mana. Lord Krishna, Indriyani dasha ekancha. Panchachendriya gocha. Indriyani dasha ekamcha. So, one is mind, that's how the 11th here. So, Tikakara says, etani granadini buddhyarthani jnanakaranani ahu etani. These, which were mentioned in the previous verse, granadini buddhyarthani jnanakaranani ahu. They are called buddhi or jnanam, they are called jnanendriyani. The organs of perception or organs of knowledge. Vakpanyadini karmane, vakpanipada, payu, upasthakhyan indriyani, vag the speech, pani the hands, payu the legs, no, pad is the leg, payu the organ of excretion, upastha the organ of urination. Indriyani karmane, karmartham. So these indriyas are meant for karma or action. What karma do they perform? Vachana, adana, gamana, visarga, anandartham. So these organs of action respectively perform the actions of speaking, grasping, moving, releasing, and enjoying. Tat karanani ahuhu. So these are the organs of performing these actions. So they, in fact, the perception also is looked upon as an action. Then the perception of the color takes place. Therefore, there must be an organ that enables us to perceive that. That's how the existence of the organ of perception called eyes is established. Or that is how Nayayikas established them anyway. Had the organ of perception not been there, the act of perception would not have taken place. Every action requires the means of action. So that means here the organ of perception must be there. Here further, tesham tad vikalpartham. Tad vikalpa tesham vikalpartham. Tesham dashanam indriyanam vikalpartham. Now we have these 10 organs. Vikalpartham. That vikalpa is that one thing takes place at a time. They all take place, the perception takes place in order, in sequence, not simultaneous. Yugapat vishaya sannidhane kramena tattad vishaya jnanat jnana niyamartham. What is vikalpartham? Yugapat vishaya sannidhane. Understand that all the objects are there simultaneously, the shabda, sparsha, rupa, all objects are there. Vachana, adana, everything is there. But at a given time, only one thing takes place. You hear, you see, you touch, you taste, etc. So, yugapat vishaya sannidhane. If the mind was not there, sense organs are in contact with the corresponding sense objects all the time. Atma, that is the perceiver, is there all the time. Therefore, theoretically, the simultaneous perception of all the objects would have taken place because all organs are working. All organs of perception are functioning. Those organs of perception are in contact with the respective objects also. And Atma perceives through them. Therefore, normally simultaneous perception, yugapat, you must perceive all the objects right away, instantaneously. That doesn't happen. That is how the presence of mind is established. It is mind that enables us to perceive one object at a time. Because mind is supposed to be atomic in size. So it is not all pervading. So it can be in one sense organ at a given time. Some say Atma is atom, If Atma is all pervading, then mind is atom. If mind is all pervading, then Atma is atom, So anyways, one atom has to be there, which can be at one place at one time. Yugapat vishaya sannidhane kramena tattad vishaya jnanat jnanad niyamartham. Kramena tattad vishaya jnanam. One by one, the jnanam, the perception of the object takes place. And that is what we observe. That's niyama is there, that one object is perceived at a time. What is that brings about that krama? Not sense organs because they are in contact with objects anyway. Not Atma because that also is shining all the time. So there is something that is responsible for the perception in sequence of one object at a time. Tan manaha, that organ is called manaha. Ukta dasha apekshaya ekadasham bhavet. So these are also organs. There was more organ called mana, and therefore, with reference to 10, it becomes 11. So, Tikakara is manascha, ekam, sadharanam, karanam, angikaryam. So, these are asadharana karana. For Shabda, the Shrotrendriya asadharana karana. For grasping, the pani hand are the asadharana karana. Along with the asadharana, there is a sadharana karana called mana. Manascha ekam, sadharanam karanam, avashyam angikarya karyam. So we would accept a sadharana, the karanam of the organ that is common to all of them. Namely, mana, we would accept it. Why? Anyatha atmana yugavat aneka indriya vishaya samprayoge sati. Otherwise, Atma is in contact with all sense organs. Sense organs are in contact with the sense objects. Therefore, yugavat aneka jnana vijayaran. Simultaneously, all the perceptions would have happened. If this intervening factor called the mind was not there, which establishes the krama or the sequence of how the perception takes place. Otherwise, simultaneous perception would have taken place, that's evamasti, but that is not so. Tathacha tasyavi. Therefore, we have to accept a karanam called the mind, which establishes this kind of order that we experience, that we experience one object at a time. That would be possible if there is a special karanam called the mind, which is the sadharanam karanam. So, every indriya is asadharanam karanam. And this is there is karanam is asadharana karanam anyway. But there also organs of perception are asadharana for a given object, and mind is sadharan with all other objects. So mind does not distinguish that I will only see and not hear, but sense organ distinguishes. Tathacha tasyavi manasah karanatvat anatmatvam indriyavati siddham. So just as sense organs are karan, mind also is a karanam, antah karanam, therefore is also anatma, that is siddham. Then for buddhi api na atma karana visheshatvaha, then buddhi is the next one. When you say antah karanam, that should include everything, but then anyway buddhi is separated from the mind. Buddhi api na atma, buddhi, the faculty of knowledge. That is the faculty of perception. Faculty of knowledge, also not atma. Karana Vishesha is also Vishesha Karanam. Just as mind is Vishesha Karanam, buddhi also is Vishesha Karanam. Function of mind is to perceive, function of buddhi is to decide what it is perceiving. Manovaditi Bauddhamatam nirakurvan tasyaha swabhavam darshayati. So buddhi also is not Atma. Buddha says that buddhi is Atma. Therefore, Bauddhamatam. So far the Tarkika matas were refuted. Now the reason why buddhi is taken separately is because of Buddha Vatam. As far as Vedanta is concerned, buddhi is part of Antahkaranam. If Antahkaranam is Anatma, it includes buddhi. But since Buddha says that buddhi is Atma, and so buddhi, charam, shunyam, etc. And so, therefore, charam buddhim. So, Kshanik Vijnani say that the buddhi that is constantly changing is Atma. It is Nirakurvan, therefore, refuting the Bauddhamata. Tasya Swabhavam Darshayati. So, for this Swabhava, the nature of buddhi is here pointed out. In order for us to understand that buddhi also having the nature that it has, it is an Atma. So next verse is Nischayartha bhaved buddhi tam sarvarthanubhavini jnatatmokta swarupena Jyotisha Vyanjayan Sada. Nischayartha bhavet buddhi. Because in our mind, nischaya also takes place that this is a pot, this is cloth, this is a book. That nischaya, not only you perceive things. So not only its color is perceived, that is where the organ of perception and mind, they have played a role. But then there is nischaya of what the object is. That nischaya or determination takes place in organ called buddhi. So therefore a separate organ called buddhi is accepted because a function called nischaya is taking place also. That is why buddhi is there. So nischayartha bhavet buddhi, Tika says nischaya artha paricheda. Artha means an object, artha paricheda, determination of what the object is. So artha prayojanam yaste sa nischayartha. So buddhi also is antahkarana vritti only. Buddhi also, perception also is vritti. Like ghatakara, patakara, mathakara, this is the manas. So manas assumes the form of an object, and what that object is determined by a vritti called buddhi. So nischayartha bhavet buddhi. Nischaya artha paricheda. Circumscribing an object. So artha prayojanam, and therefore to identify an object is the purpose of which, or determine what the object is the purpose of which faculty. Jasya antahkarana, the antahkarana vritti, of which the nature is to determine what that artha is, what the object is. Sa nischayartha buddhi bhavet. That is called the antahkarana vritti, or a state of mind. It's called buddhi, which is the nischayatmika, or so vyavasayatmika, which determines devasayatmika rather. So what determines what the nature is. In short, nischaya karanam buddhi. So karanam, the organ which brings about nischaya or determination or ascertaining the object is called buddhi. So manaha is only perceiving the object, and buddhi is determining the object. Sarvarthanubhavinim buddhim. And this buddhi is the one that anubhavining experience all the objects and enables us to experience all the objects. Buddhi. So just as the mind also is associated with all the objects also, buddhi is associated with all the objects also. So both manaha and buddhi are common to all the organs of perception and action. Nischaya karanam buddhi ityartha. Therefore buddhi is nischaya karanam. The instrument or the means with it nischaya is done, is buddhi. So first of all, nischayartha bhavet buddhi sarvarthanubhavini buddhi. Tam ज्ञाता आत्मा उक्त है. So tasyaha jnata, in fact, so tam sarvarthanubhavinim jyotisha vyanjan. That's how the anvaya is. Tam sarvarthanubhavinim buddhim swarupena jyotisha vyanjan sada atma jnata ukta. So sada atma jnata ukta. Jnata atma jnata ukta. Atma is called jnata, the knower. So what enables the Atma to become the knower? That faculty is called buddhi. What does the buddhi do? Tam sarvarthanubhavini. That buddhi that in fact creates the experience or determines all the objects, and swarupena jyotisha vyanjan. The buddhi vritti also is known because it is vyanjan, illumined by Jyotisha, by the light of consciousness, which is Swarupa, the nature of Atma. So Atma, by the inherent consciousness, which is nature, illumines their buddhi vritti, which is nischayatmika, and which makes nischaya for all the objects of senses. And so, tasya jnata atma uktaha. Atma is said to be the jnata because buddhi also is unconscious, and buddhi cannot be known unless it is illumined by the consciousness. Then buddhi also illumined is also jnaya, and atma is different from the atma is jnata. Therefore, anya drishyatvadapi tasya anatmatvam. So buddhi is drishya, is illumined by objective of atma. Therefore, buddhi also is anatma. बुद्धि ज्ञातु अपि बुद्धि अन्य ज्ञेयत्व शंका वारयति. सो इंद्रियाणि पराण्यहुः इंद्रियेभ्यः परं मनः मनसस्तु परा बुद्धिः. सो देन से बुद्धि ज्ञातु अपि यो बुद्धेः परतस्तु स. सो वन दैट नोस द बुद्धि आल्सो इज परः. बट बुद्धि ज्ञातु अपि ऑल दैट आत्मा इल्यूमिनेट्स द बुद्धि. सो कौन आत्मा द ज्ञाता बुद्धिवत अन्य ज्ञेयत्व शंका. Then who is it that knows the Atma? If every knower also is known, then Atma that is knower also must be known by, Rupam Drishyam Lochanam Druk Tad Drishyam Druktamanasam Drishya Dhivritte Sakshi Drugevana Dushyate. So this has to also somewhere to stop. That it's not that every drashta is drishya, there is drashta which is not drishya. So swarupena jyotisha vyanjan. Atma is not drashta in the primary sense. The drashta in the primary sense also is drishya. But drashta also is modification. Because drashta also keeps on changing depending upon the drishya. Therefore, drashta also is a vikara, therefore that also is illumined. Atma is called drashta not in primary sense. That Atma undergoes vikara to become drashta. Swarupena jyotisha vyanjayan. Atma is called jnata only in a secondary sense because it illumines that buddhivati also Swarupena Jyotisha, by the light of its own nature consciousness. Meaning that Atma can be called Jnata because it illumines the Buddhi, but not Jnata because it doesn't undergo any change. Buddhi Jnaturapi Buddhivat Anya Jnayatva Shankam Varati Swarupena Jyotishayati. तथा च भाष्य भाषकयोः रूपालोको हैव भेदात् भाष्यः बुद्धे अन्यः भाषकात्म इत्यर्थः. No, but this was the answer to how come Atma is not also Bhasya. Because Swarupena Jyotisha Bhasayan, that is the reason why Atma does not undergo any transformation to illumine the Buddhi. This was a subject matter of the previous chapter. That no transformation takes place in sun to illumine the snake. The illumination takes place when the object, which itself is achetanam or unconscious, comes in contact with the light. That's how it gets illuminated. No effort is involved on the part of the light, no effort is involved on the part of the Atma, and therefore Atma remaining changeless illumines the Buddhi. So Atma is not the Jnata in the primary sense, therefore it cannot become object of knowledge. And Buddhi is illumined, therefore Buddhi is an Atma. So two things are established. Buddhi is an Atma and Atma is Atma. Atma is Nitya Drashta. Therefore does not, it is self-effulgent, doesn't require any other Drashta to illumine that. Whereas Buddhi is illumined, therefore is an Atma. तथा च भाष्य भाषकयोः रूपालोकयोः इव. So Rupa and Aloka. Aloka means light. Rupa means a form. So Bhasya, Rupa is Bhasya, Aloka is Bhasaka. Iva Vedat. So we find these two are always different. The Bhasaka is different from Bhasya. The illuminator is different from what is illumined. Therefore, भाष्यायाः बुद्धेः अन्यः भाषकः आत्मा. So, भाषकः भाष्यायाः अन्य. The illuminator is अन्यः, different from what is illumined. Here भाष्या because buddhi is striling, otherwise भाष्यस्य. And so, भाषकः अन्यः. Bhasaka, the illuminator, is necessarily different from Bhasya, what is illumined. Atma is illuminator, Buddhi is illumined, Buddhi is therefore not Atma, Buddhi is Anatma also. So, first the Tarkikas are addressed, now the Bauddha is addressed. Now, having come to this point, then this will be further explored to arrive at the nature of the Atma. We'll see. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vasishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Shankaram Shankaracharyam Keshavam Badarayanam Sutrabhashya Krutau Vande Bhagavantau Punah Punah Ishvaro Gururatmeti Murti Bheda Vibhagine Vyomavad Dehaya Dakshina Murtaye Namaha. Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om.